Yeah.
3, 2, not yet.
There we go. Now we are live.
Now we are live.
All right, Linus, go ahead, take it away. Give us our amazing intro.
All right, I'd like to welcome you to yet another trans-hemispheric live stream from Taidu Studios. Reporting from the U.S., we have the big dragon himself, Sean Taidu Head, in the house. Say hello, Sensei.
Hello.
And from the thriving metropolis of Hegari, Japan, I am your humble magsman, Linus May Callahan. Good morning, everyone. And we are also thrilled to have a special guest with us today, the oft-mentioned shakuhachi maker and teacher, Nick Hoko Bellando, is joining us from his home in Aomori Prefecture. Are you with us there, Nick?
Yes, indeed. I was told, though, that this was a love stream. You're saying it's a live stream? Was that just a typo?
Yeah, sorry, it was a typo.
What?
No, I had all kinds of good feelings ready for you guys.
I mean, I meant it as love stream, but I mean, I guess we can just do live. That's fine too. Okay, never mind.
All right.
Sean, I talked to the guys in legal. They said that wasn't going to go well.
Got it. All right, so find a way to clean it up. Understood.
Right. So we're going to be asking Nick everything you always wanted to know about flute making, but were afraid to ask. So feel free to fill up the chat with all of your burning questions. And speaking of burning, given how cold it is here in Hegari, I can imagine that your home is a winter wonderland, Nick.
It truly is. I took my kids to a snow camp this weekend, and we had to literally drive through a tunnel of snow to get to the parking lot. It was higher than the car on both sides. It was pretty cool.
Ooh.
Well, we actually have snow here in Nara Prefecture that is sticking to the ground. And I don't think that's going to last past like 10 a.m., but still, that's a rarity for us. So, pretty chilly here. Listen, before we get too far into our actual topic, I think we should address the elephant in the room. And I just want to say, Tenno Tanjobi Omedetou gozaimasu. For those of you whose Japanese is a bit rusty or shitty like mine, that means Happy Emperor's Birthday. So today is the observance of the 65th birthday of Emperor Naruhito. His actual birthday was yesterday, but today's the national holiday.
Observed.
And he celebrated with a press conference and then a public audience. And at the press conference, he remarked on the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II and called upon the people of Japan to continue to teach the tragedy of war and the importance of peace to Japan's younger generations. And after that fun-filled festivity, there was a palace banquet, the first since they were canceled back during COVID. And the press release from this all says that the banquet was attended by representatives from various fields. I assume you gentlemen were both invited and just you couldn't make it because of like scheduling problems?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, they understand. They know that I have really important things to do, so...
Right. As the most convincing Santa Claus in Kansai, or, I mean, if not all of Japan, I'm just assuming that my invitation was lost in the mail.
No,
They might have sent it to the North Pole by accident.
Yeah.
Oh, right. That could be it. So, that silliness aside, we are pleased to have Nick here with us today, and he is going to answer all the burning questions. I don't know if you've listened to the live stream, Nick, but we literally mention you like every other week.
Yeah.
My ears were burning, that's why.
Yeah, so
I put Q-tips so I could see in there. My ears were burning.
Yeah, every Monday morning, the burning sensation, that's coming from us. And it's not from the love stream, it's from the live stream. So, all right. Well, now, so Nick, why don't you give us like the hottest intro of yourself that you can possibly give? Really hot take, on fire, 45 seconds.
Brief bio, go.
Gosh. Yeah, I'm the most low energy kind of slow person that you can get. So this is me really excited with sunglasses on, sparks flying out. Right? Well, let's see. I started playing shakuhachi back last century, and I wanted to. I guess my motivation for making flutes was that I wanted to kind of take my playing deeper, I guess. There was just like things that I couldn't find out just by playing, so I had to start making. So that's what I did. I learned from a bunch of people, and I also learned that what I like the best is the old style, or an old style, since there are multiple older styles, I suppose. So that's kind of what I focus on is ancient techniques, ancient flutes. I study a lot of the hitiogiri. Also, Fuke Shakuhachi, just focusing on the older iterations, which again, who can say how old anything is? But I kind of like old things, so that's what I do. In more layman's terms, that would be kind of jinashi. But again, if you say jinashi, that can mean a couple of things. Not modern jinashi, but old style jinashi shakuhachi. So I make them, I teach them, and I do the hitiogiri stuff as well. I don't do concerts too much. I will sometimes play and talk, but as a relatively introverted person, I like the one-on-one stuff the best.
Cool. And who were your primary teachers for making and learning? We could maybe give the two of each.
Yeah, so for learning, Barry Weiss and Suiko Takahashi were who I kind of got my main start with. Also, Dr. Yamada taught me Kinpuryu. I just disobeyed the rules and gave you 3 people there, I guess. And for making, I learned modern making with Mira Ryuho, and that is actually what kind of taught me what I'm doing, because in learning modern shakuhachi, I realized that it was actually so fundamentally different from what I had been doing. It was kind of amazing. There's a lot of good things that I got from Yoda Sensei as well. Suiko also taught me the fundamentals of making old style shakuhachi as well, and then from there I've learned from other people, from books, from people who aren't alive anymore, and lots of other things too.
Oh, very nice. So,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Can you tell us a little bit about your bamboo name? I know this is something that always is fascinating to people. Primarily people who don't speak Japanese and have no idea what's going on with these names, but it's fascinating to those listeners. So if you can tell us a little bit of how you got Hoko, would be great.
Is that came from my teacher Suiko. Sui is to blow or play shakuhachi, right? And ko is old, furui, right? So I got his ko, and I took ho ko. Ho is written as 2 moons, and it means kind of a friend. It's a special word for friend. So old friend or friend to the old. The specific character comes from Confucius, from the opening phrase of the Analects, right? Tomo no enbo yori kitaru ari. Mata tanushikarazu ya. Right? A friend from afar has come to study together. Is it not your joy and pleasure? Right? And that was kind of my relationship with my teacher too. That's also my approach to shakuhachi, right? It's about friendship.
Wow, that's way better answer than I expected.
Well, actually, what's interesting about like our festival name being Taibo Festival is that it is the Great Friends, festival if you translate it directly, as well.
It's not like Taibo like Billy Blanks.
Well, we do that too, but that's more for that's secret training. That is Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon stuff there.
I'm there for the
So
deeper side of shakuhachi.
So we have your first question already, which is I already asked Sean about wood last time. What do you think about wood for shakuhachi? How about soft woods like pine and something stabilized with resin?
Yeah, that's curious. I think the most difficult thing for making a shakuhachi out of wood, I'm aware that, what do they call it, seifu, right? There's that wooden shakuhachi that is kind of very common to come across in Japan. People buy for students and that sort of thing, and it's it's bored out and turned on a lathe, it looks like. I don't know. I think unconventional materials are interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
The difficult thing is boring a straight hole that's that long, right? So obviously you've got to make it in 2 pieces. Maybe you don't have to if you find a good way to bore it, but when you're boring the hole, it's the drill is going to get sucked by the grain of the wood, so you kind of have to drill with the grain and then how do you get it to be straight for a piece of wood that's that long, right? Like a 1.8 or more. So I think that's the challenge. It's not something I've done too much myself. But softwoods, I would think that something like pine, and again, if it's farmed pine, right? Pine that can grow very quickly ends up being very soft. So on the positive side, I think that would probably be easier. The fibers tend to be very long and straight, so that would probably work well in terms of boring it. Um, the only negative thing is that when it's that kind of like soft pine, is that it's soft. You could like dent it with your fingernail very easily, so it wouldn't really last well. So hardening it with resin, that would make sense. Is pine, or at least the pine around here, like that, really soaks things up well. So I might do something like urushi, hardening it with urushi if I were working on that. Thinning out urushi with some turpentine, for example, do like 50-50, slather the whole thing with as much urushi as it'll drink up, and then cure it. So you got this kind of nice hardened exterior, and then you can do more urushi work on it.
So,
But man, resin would be a good idea too, I'm sure.
so in general, do you think that like the hardwood would be a better choice, like if you do something like oak or maple, just because of the like because bamboo is a very hard substance, but it's so porous, which is what makes it so different than wood. So,
Yeah. That would be there would be a trade off, right? And do you want it to be easy to bore, or and lightweight, or do you want it to be difficult to bore but more durable and also heavy, right? So there's some pluses and minuses to each one. So I mean, just off the cuff, I kind of like the idea of using a lightweight wood that's easy to bore that you then harden with another material later on, right? And if you want it to just look like wood, though, I mean, I would think that maple would be a nice option because you could get the sort of flamed maple effect and polish it up nice, but it would also be it wouldn't be easily damaged, but it would be pretty heavy, so that's another thing to think about.
yeah, the weight of it.
Yeah. Well, the cost of getting like I come to shakuhachi from like the guitar and ukulele world, and like the cost of getting a nice piece of like flamed maple or quilted maple that was big enough in diameter to make a flute, like luthiers just they got that's send your kids to college kind of money, to get that a piece of wood like that. So it would be difficult to have something really, really pretty that you bored into a flute. What about the split down the middle, assemble it in two pieces, like the way sword scabbards are made? Where they do that with Native American flutes sometimes, and sort of route out the middle and then glue the.
Yeah, that would. I'm kind of curious. I don't, I've never really looked very closely at the wooden ones. I was kind of wondering how they bore it because the seifu, I think, is used. Are they using maple? They might be using maple. They're using a harder wood anyway for that. So I was kind of wondering how they get the bore so nice and straight. And that's, if you looked closer, you might be able to see a seam there. I would expect that doing what you said would be maybe the only way to get a really, truly accurate bore shape there.
Because I think some of the bigger Native American flutes are made with routers, where it's two pieces, and the real key is trying to get a good fit. But they're a different. I mean, it's a different thing. They're almost like ocarinas at that point because they're like a chamber flute, as opposed to like a conical bore that we think of, on our flutes or a recorder or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Lots of them are very kind of long, but then the finger holes are closer together, right? There's a lot of bore after the finger holes on some of them. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's curious.
So I have a question for you while we wait for everybody else to have their questions coming in. So everybody who's watching, please feel free to comment your questions below for Nick. Anything about making old style flutes, Kimpuryu, whatever you have it, throw it at.
Well.
Yeah, modern making as well. So throw it all at him while he's here. And if you haven't liked this video or shared this video, if you are not subscribed, or if you want to be on the membership and have a chance to win a flute, do all those things. So I hear that you're not the biggest fan of boiled linseed oil for bamboo. Can you tell me why?
And linseed oil is, on the one hand, sometimes you want an oil that dries and cures, but if you're putting it on the inside, it is going to change the tone of the flute, right? Especially if you layer it on there, because it's, it hardens, it dries and it hardens, right? So that's going to make kind of a new surface. So if you're putting linseed oil on the inside of a flute, like for example, instead of urushi, I would say, that's fine, but I would want to brush it on really thin and make sure it doesn't glob up, because then, otherwise you risk really changing the way the flute plays, right?
My thought.
I'm not like against it, but it just depends on, again, why are you putting it in and what result do you expect, right?
Yeah. So my thought.
If you want to maintain a natural bore, then maybe you don't want to use that. You want to use an oil that will kind of soak in, that you'll have to reapply.
Yeah, my thought was on the external part of the instrument and having the oil seep into the pores of the outside, and then having it be in an expand state. So then, if it's always expanded, then you don't run the risk of having it crack because of the expansion and the compression of the instrument when you playing it and whatever.
Yeah, I'm not. How breathable is linseed oil? That's something that I don't know. But in principle, that makes sense to me. The only thing is that with bamboo, it absorbs only this way. It doesn't absorb anything this way. So it'll absorb, because the fibers are going this way, and there's pores here. It'll absorb a lot through the top. It'll absorb a lot through the bottom. But through the skin, or even if you sand off the skin and use the sides, it's still not going to absorb anything, because you've just got this side of the fibers going vertically through it, so it doesn't really absorb anything. But that said, lots of ancient flutes don't have anything like that with me, aside from just on the root end. Well, this one's coated with urushi though, right? They'll be coated with urushi like that, and the purpose is exactly what you said, to kind of make it more durable, right? I mean, it's aesthetic too, but it keeps it from cracking, right? It's because urushi is breathable, but it's slowly breathable. So instead of like taking on a lot of moisture at once, then letting off a lot of moisture at once, it kind of adapts to the environment more slowly, and that gives the entire flute a chance to kind of acclimate when things start to dry out, for example. So you're a lot less likely to have cracks when you've got the urushi coating. I would expect that a linseed oil coating might have the same effect, so that might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, it says that linseed oil is breathable, and it also even allows wood, metal, and porous surfaces like brick and stucco to breathe. So didn't know that you could go all the way up to metal and brick, but apparently you can. So, well, that's good to know. I have another question for you from one of our subscribers here. From Eric, he asks, can you define Kimpu-ryu and Hito-yogiri? I am unfamiliar with those terms.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just in a couple of words, give us Kimpo-ryu. That'll be easy.
Kimpu-ryu is a school of shakuhachi that came from the Nezasaha sect from the Komuso era. So we know that Nezasaha was around from the 1600s, so it's a pretty old school. And they, like most Komuso schools, it had about 10 pieces or so in its repertoire, right? And these were played by the Komuso. And it traveled around Japan. It made its way to Hirosaki, where I live here up in northern Honshu, specifically in Aomori. And this is the only place that it actually survived. So there's kind of a branch of Nezasaha that is called Kimpu-ryu. And anybody who plays it, even if they call it Nezasaha, they're actually playing the Kimpu-ryu pieces. And they are notable that they have certain characteristics that northern Japanese honkyoku have, and some that are very specific to it. So they use komibuki. So it's a kind of a pulsing breath. There's a lot of explanations why that is. Some people say it's because everybody was practicing out in the cold and the windy nights, so that you needed to keep your sound happening. Might have just been because it's cold when you're using your abdomen to create that breath. It actually kind of circulates the blood and it warms you up. I always start to sweat if I play too much. Especially in the winter, it really gets your blood flowing, which is nice. And and a couple other things, but it's a relatively unique northern school of shakuhachi.
And Hitoyogiri.
So for the second one,
Yeah.
Hitoyogiri is the ancient shakuhachi, the ancestor of the shakuhachi. I have this one in plastic because I had just took it down to Tokyo. I played for a friend's wedding, but it's shorter than a shakuhachi, right? Instead of 1.8, it's like 1.1 plus alpha. And the repertoire is completely different, but the Honkyoku style is still the same. So, if you think of Honkyoku being older pieces that are sort of free rhythm, they don't have a beat, and they're more sort of time to your breath. It was played similarly, by samurai, by monks, and those kind of people, and just to give you a feel for the sound of it. Okay. So a little bit different from shakuhachi, but still shakuhachi. This is the older version of the shakuhachi from the 1500s and slightly before that, or maybe quite a bit before that as well. So it's kind of, at least in some senses, where Fuke shakuhachi and then the modern shakuhachi came from.
And we do have a course coming up for beginners that are interested in playing Hitoyogiri. So if you're interested, you can join Nick and I in June, where we're teaching a course for Oshiki, which is the summer mode. Hitoyogiri plays in 5 modes, and we also offer resin instruments as well that you can learn on. So we all use the same instruments, so everything's is in tune. Because the Hitoyogiris are always can be kind of fluctuating when you buy an older one. They're not always the same pitch.
Yeah. And also, even if it's kind of in tune, the Hitoyogiri is very flexible, right? Right, so it helps to have, if you all have the same flute, then you can tell, oh, where am I supposed to play this? Because it's not like you open a hole and it makes the tone, right? It's more like it's almost like a violin. You kind of have to have the tone in mind as you play it.
All right, we still have some more questions coming in, and so the first question here is, I think this one might be too long, so feel free to skip it. Are there differences with Hitoyogiri and shakuhachi except bore shape that Hitoyogiri is not from the root piece? What should I know if I want to make a Hitoyogiri?
Yeah, well, it would be too long to go into everything about making Hitoyogiri, but the main difference is that, well, you just have one node in Hitoyogiri, and with shakuhachi you have up to 7 nodes, or at least, the functional nodes here are somewhat on the mouthpiece. Or this one is just cured, so it's still on my curing stick. But then the first node, second node, third node, fourth node all kind of define the internal chambers of the flute. And then, the 3 nodes at the end are more aesthetic. Sometimes they're functional, but mostly just aesthetic. But the note at the end kind of makes a difference too. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 air chambers interacting on the shakuhachi. On the Hitoyogiri, you don't really have that. You just have this, and you've got the node that kind of acts as a choke, and the rest of the flute. However, on some, or if you get lucky, sometimes there's a node here, and that can assist in balancing the flute, right? Every once in a while, without a node here, it can be a little bit hit or miss. Sometimes you'll find a piece of bamboo that just doesn't really work very well without the extra node there to tune. When it works well, it's perfect. This one doesn't have it, and I love it. A lot of the older ones don't have it either. But a handful of older ones, maybe like this one. Let me show you.
Yeah, one of the OC asked what pitch the Hitoyogiri should be. Like, is it sort of in D, or the way we think of our 1.8s? And I know that's a sort of a modern convention, but what pitch would we normally see a Hitoyogiri in?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so the standard Hitoyogiri is Oshiki, and Oshiki is the modern, the old equivalent of basically an A, but that can be qualified saying it's an A an old A, like at A 430 hertz, right? So think kind of A flat-ish.
Yeah, it would be like a quarter tone flat, so it's not quite an A flat, not quite an A, somewhere in between. So very cool. So let's see here. We have a couple more questions here as well that I want to get into, but before we even get to those, so I've talked a lot about our project of doing this kind of Taidu beginner's flute, which is not really even a beginner's flute. So it's going to be way more than that, and we've had to delay it because of some issues. And I thought we should probably talk about how the process of creating this flute, where it's mixing between the two of our styles. So, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, well, basically, I made a flute, and here's one. There we go. This is kind of right my style, and it's notable because of smaller finger holes, right, and rather oblique utaguchi. It's not very steep. The utaguchi cut is relatively shallow, right? Maybe 1 millimeter cut from the top, right?
I like that you had the thumbs down on it too. I guess that was just for me. I like a little bit of the deeper ones.
Yeah. So. And it's made, so old style playing really doesn't use any half holing or anything like that. So it's made so that you can do a lot with a little breath, quieter sound. Modern flutes. Basically, what I did to make one for Sean is just take this and make it a little bit more modern style. So bigger finger holes, sharper cut, deeper cut. All right, you can see, if you compare these two, you can see the deeper cut on the mouthpiece. That lets you get kind of more volume and a higher pitch. Length is the same. Finger holes are bigger, right? You can see the bigger finger holes there. And see that results in right, you can do the half holing very comfortable because the finger holes are bigger. You can get a slightly higher pitch. You can actually get a D out of it rather than the slightly lower pitch of this one because of the smaller holes. And a little more volume, stronger breath, right?
And so we've run into an issue of having to delay them because of some manufacturing things, and so I thought we'd talk just a little bit of why, because some people are waiting for them, and it's understandable. And so, but what are some of the issues that we're running into, and why are we considering moving away from carbon fiber over to resin?
Well, I've been making these. I spent almost 3 years now kind of developing them, obviously while doing other things. It wasn't only spent on this, but a lot of the work has come into kind of comparing materials and then the process of printing them from those materials. And one thing that I noticed is I have a couple people kind of testing these for me, and while the carbon fiber is nice, it looks nice, it sounds nice, there's a little bit of a durability issue, and that has to do with the printing process, right? Because the best way to print it to get a good sound is vertically, so you've got these sort of horizontal layers going on. And even though, a small section like this would be very strong, if I try to break it with my hands, I can't break it, right? But once you have the whole flute, if you drop this, from waist level on a hardwood floor, chances are it would break. Right, so if you're careful with it, fine. Nobody has broken one yet. I just have a handful of them out there. But
you haven't sent one to me, so that's why that's not broken yet.
Indeed. It's I want it to be more durable than that. I want it to be able to kind of you can accidentally drop it and you don't have to worry about it. Technically speaking, with a modern shakuhachi, if you dropped a bare bamboo shakuhachi from waist level on a hardwood floor, there's question that you might actually do some damage to the bamboo too. The bamboo could crack, or the joint could take on some damage. So, it should be something that you're careful with and treat it like an instrument. But nevertheless, part of the idea behind this one is I want it to be something you can travel with. and kind of not worry about, right? So something that plays good, looks good, sounds good, but you can also take it with you on an airplane and not worry about it cracking when it dries out, right? Or accidentally leave it in your car and it's not going to melt, which is, so the resin that I've been using is durable, shock resistant, and it can handle very, very high temperatures. You'd have to get it way past boiling point to do any damage to it. So, a hot car is no problem.
And honestly,
so that's kind of what I'm moving towards.
Yeah.
But again, I kind of, I still want to keep the cost down as much as possible. So there's still a couple of materials that I'd like to test before we make it the final product.
And there's a lot of parts about the carbon fiber. I love the feel and I really love the weight of it. But the resin it feels higher quality, and of course it is. It's much more of an expensive material than carbon fiber, and so there's a lot to experiment with. So it's actually been very fun to do this along with you and try things out and see what works. And of course, as soon as sometimes we find a solution of something like, oh, if we do this, but then it triples the cost of it of just manufacturing it. Especially some of the answers involve a lot of hands-on nick time instead of just printing time.
Yeah.
Well,
that's
the early
prototype that we've been striking.
Sorry, the early prototype that I got to play, the playability of it was really great, like compared to some other alternative material flutes that I've played, and that has to do with the fact that you guys were trying to keep the nodes, the internal nodes, present in, even though this is a 3D printed flute, you were trying to replicate bamboo, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I actually I used a piece of bamboo from one of the flutes that I made, and then I spent a lot of time modeling the bore after the bore of the bamboo. So it's got the natural bore shape and it has the nodes left in. And that's, the intention is to give you the sound of an old style bamboo flute, right? Sort of Edo style bamboo flute that just has the natural bamboo walls and the nodes left in. I don't know if I hold it up to the camera, you can probably see.
Oh yeah,
right?
we can hear
Not
it.
round, it's sort of an oval shape, right? And then you can see the nodes that are left in there as well.
Yeah, and so let's see here. So it looks like we're going to go back to Hita Yogiri for just a second. One of the listeners wants to hear a little bit more about the gagaku modes that are involved with Hita Yogiri. This comes from LaRon Harrison saying, again, you need to get into gagaku modes. And then someone afterwards says, I want to hear about gagaku modes. So take it away.
Yeah, sure. All right, so on the Hita Yogiri, the gagaku modes are slightly different in that when we say things like hyojo, we mean something a little bit different, right? Gagaku takes the ritsu and ryo scales, and for example, hyojo would be ritsu, right? And other modes like ichikotsu would be ryo, right? So even though we consider ichikotsu ryo, for example, we just take the ritsu scale and start it at the ichikotsu tone, right? So it ends up being, you don't have to understand all of that. All you have to understand is that, these are the gagaku modes, but we interpret them a little bit different just for the convenience of the flute, because we want each mode to have kind of different tones in it, right? So this is the ritsu scale, basically. Right? And we take those 5 tones, those basic tones, and maintain their relative relationship, and then shift them up and down the flute. So when you're playing oshiki, you play the ritsu scale from the oshiki tone, which is like the A, or like what we know as a ro on the shakuhachi. And then for the banshiki is the B, and that starts at this hole. So take the ritsu scale and start it at that hole. You hear how they're the same kind of relative scale? First oshiki. Banshiki.
Yeah.
But You think like, okay, they're the same, but then when you actually put them on the flute and shift them up and down, you end up with kind of different relationships on the flute. So if you take the scale starting at the root note of the flute, it ends up like this: oshiki, banshiki, again, oshiki, banshiki. Right, so things kind of change, and then because you're playing pieces on this very limited flute with a limited range, the modes really give you a different feel from one to another.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And again, then there's 5 of them. I just showed you 2, the first 2, but there's the same would be for each kotsu on the each kotsu tone or D. You'd start the same scale here, and so on. Right?
Mm-hmm. Very good. So Eric asks on the hitoyogiri, is there a kan and daikon on that instrument?
Yeah, what we know, it's funny you asked that for kan, right? I think the word kan actually started with the hitoyogiri, because there is a tone that we use in the upper register, which is known as kan. And that's kind of the upper register. So I'm kind of, and it's also, it's written in the same way that we write kan, which is sort of unconventional, and it doesn't, when we say ko otsu, or like upper and lower in Japanese, this kan thing doesn't really come in too much. Like, where did it come from? Probably came from the hitoyogiri. So kan talks about the upper register. In hitoyogiri, however, we don't call it that. We just have a handful of notes in the upper register. You've got the first octave in oshiki, for example. Right. And then in the second octave, you've got the octave above the A, and then you've got the B pitch as well, right? With a couple different fingerings. And you can actually get up to a D. Sorry, that's going to be a little bit loud maybe, but that's the highest tone, right? So it's at like 1.4 octaves, basically. And that's all you use. So the kind of interesting nature of the music comes not from the large range of tones as much as the interesting combination of tones, and also going back to gagaku scales. In gagaku, tones each have a personality. They'll have things that they do. So, and that kind of makes it interesting, even though you're just hearing mostly just 5 tones. Some of them tend to slide into each other, so you've got these intermediary tones at the larger intervals, and you also have some that are going to tend to vibrate or yuru, right? Some that'll kind of shimmer a bit, some that tend to dip, some that are very straightforward, some that tend to rise. Right? So each tone of those 5 tones has sort of a personality, so it gives a very different feeling of music. Again, in Western music, we tend to have like this combination in harmony, or just in modern music. I shouldn't say Western music. I should say in modern music, right? But in ancient music and in ancient monophonic music, Gregorian chant included, you tend to have this sort of relationship between a nuclear tone and then the other tones that are sort of dancing around it and then coming back, and then sort of looking to settle back around that nuclear tone as well, or around the root tone of the mode, and then each note having its own sort of characteristics in terms of tone color. So it's a very different way of composing pieces and different way of playing and hearing as well.
That's a very similar to the way that Takamitsu would write his music. He thought of like a nuclear pitch, and then his melodies kind of circled around that note, and then it would end up at the end of the note. So if you think of like the opening of his flute solo, Air, it's much like that. Start on a nuclear pitch, you kind of dance around and go to all these extravagant places, and then you kind of end up back on that nuclear pitch again.
Yeah, he was very much thinking about gagaku when he was composing too, I think, right?
Oh yeah.
Gagaku does the same thing.
Yeah, even the his piece, "A Flock Descends into the Pentagonal Gardens," a very full title for a piece. A lot of it uses the DNA of the composition comes from the chord structures of the shoal. So was very much into the music of Gagaku and Shakuhachi, and Biwa.
Yeah, and you can tell you can hear it very much. Once that in an autumn garden, you can hear that very gagaku sound coming through. He's even got show in that. If everybody wants to hear what we're talking about a nuclear tone, right? So to sort of illustrate that concretely speaking, on the hitiyugiri, right, the root tone will be oshikire. Right, and then the fourth tone of the scale would be an E, relatively speaking, is the nuclear tone, and that's the one that tends to do yuri and what the melody is always drawn back towards. And then to finalize it, you always go back to the A, right? So as you play, you'll start going. And then the piece will always end with a. Right, so it goes up to that nuclear tone, it dances around, it goes up, it comes back, it goes down, it comes back. It always likes to like hang around there and then finally settle back down to the root tone.
And this is also just like as you were saying, it's very similar to the gagaku music. It's very similar to the music of shomyo and a lot of music of this period too. It's of like high art music, it seems.
Yeah, I would say so. And it's true in Gregorian chant as well. In the church modes, they all basically do the same thing. There's still like this sort of reciting tone, they would call it, right, where you chant the psalms at the reciting tone, but then the antiphons always tend to kind of settle at the root tone, or at the final pitch, whatever that might be for the mode.
Yeah. And they have 7 modes, 7 church modes, and also the I think the Eastern Orthodox, the Byzantine chant also has 7 modes that they utilize as well. A very interesting thing. So let's see here. How much time do you have, Nick? I know we have to let you go pretty soon.
I would take another 10 minutes or so if there's any more questions. It's fine.
Sure. Here's one from. Yeah, just got a question for you actually. So, OC Art here, it says about shakuhachi. If you wanted to make one with cylindrical bore, do you think there's a possibility for it to work with a Boehm flute system?
With a what?
Boehm flute system.
I'm not seeing that word. Boehm?
Boehm. Boehm.
I'm not sure if I know what that is. Can you describe it to me? Maybe I can look it up here.
So the Boehm.
It's the key system.
Yeah, it's the key system that they started in like the mid 19th century.
Okay, let me take a look at that right now. So it's basically asking if you made it with a cylindrical flute, could you use it with the Boehm flute system, which is a system of keywork for the flute by Theobald Boehm. Right, and just waiting for Wikipedia to load here.
Oh, I see. And there's 8 modes in There's 8 modes in Gregorian chant. I forgot the hypomixolydian.
Yeah, there's 8.
Yeah.
It's just the same mode with a different final tone, basically.
Yeah. Okay, so while we're looking that up and having that, we will answer another question here. Christian Briggs says, "My friend, I find it hard to motivate myself to practice shakuhachi at times, yet another flute style." So I'm just talking about adding to add hitayogiri to the mix. So I guess the question to get from this one is it hard to balance playing both shakuhachi and hitayogiri?
Right. Well, I guess I'll start off by answering just from my own experience. No, because it's so interesting. So,
Mm.
but again, that's me. But it's they're different enough that the Hitogiri is interesting on its own, but they're also similar enough so that they should feed into each other and kind of give insight into one another as well. If there's anything difficult about it, it's just that with the Hitogiri, you're going to be taking on new information, right? So, I guess the trick would be to discover how quickly you can or want to absorb new information and then just kind of study it at that pace. For example, if you were doing the Hitogiri course with us, you might find like, oh wait, I don't quite get everything just yet. And my advice in that case would be just don't worry about it. Absorb whatever you kind of naturally absorb, and then think of it as a long game rather, right? So that you're, instead of understanding everything at once, you're just kind of like, all right, one pass, I picked up this and this, and then the next year you go through it again, right? Because with Hitogiri, the modes change each season, so we go through all of the seasons of the year, and then you just do the same thing again next year, and it goes a little deeper. Same thing next year, it goes a little bit deeper, right? So there would be things that are challenging for it, but my recommendation to dealing with that would be that, again, for some people it's just fine because, like me, you're interested enough in it that you just kind of like naturally put some energy into it. But on the other hand, if you don't have the time to absorb everything at once, I would also just say that, the way to deal with the challenge is to absorb it as much as you want, put as much energy into it as you're motivated to put into it. And part of maintaining the motivation is just kind of learning together with other people, I think. But I also not to worry about it, right? Because you do the same thing next year and the same thing the year after, and you just kind of get deeper and deeper into it at the pace with which you can absorb things kind of naturally, right?
Yeah, and I found that for all the feedback that we've gotten from our students, which we've had a fair amount of students and enough feedback to, I think, give a really good understanding of how people who have played shakuhachi and who haven't played shakuhachi feel about it. Shakuhachi players tend to do pretty well with it. I think at the beginning the notation's a little bit hard for them because we use the fu-hou system. But once you get outside of that, and once you get the notation and you start to, the uncomfortable parts start to drop off, people tend to really enjoy it and they really get into it, especially even by the end of the first class series, like so the set of 12 classes that we teach. Then by the time they get into the second one, the same sort of anxiety comes in of like, oh no, a new mode. But then by the end of it, they go, actually, that wasn't that bad. And now we have people who have gone through all the modes with us now. So
yeah, and also with Banshiki, it's a new mode, but we're still playing. Sometimes we take the same pieces we played before and we play them in a different mode. So as you go through, the pieces themselves start to become very familiar, and when you play the same piece you've played before but in a new mode, there's a couple differences, but it's not like you're just hitting a new information all in the face at once. It's kind of like you've got something to grasp this time, and it kind of feeds into itself that way.
Absolutely, and so for people that are on the live stream watching, you can purchase a Hita Yogiri at the link that I just posted. And if you're interested in the Hita Yogiri and want to join our class, take a look at this second link that I'm about ready to post, which is here. And this is our course that we are offering this year in June. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me through my website, seanheadmusic.com, and I can answer any of those scheduling questions that you have or other questions that you have about the instrument and about the courses.
I posted this earlier.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I posted it earlier, but I'm posting it again, just Nick's own page. If you want to contact Nick directly, or you want to buy a flute from Nick, or something like that, that's where you can reach him online.
Yeah, thanks, Linus. And about the Hitogiri again, like it's to me what's been the most interesting is like you're really learning a lot about the roots of shakuhachi. Like this comes from the Muromachi era, so it's before Fuke shakuhachi, before anything happened with the shakuhachi as we know it today. This is what people were doing, so you can see things that have changed, you can also see things that are the same. And this character Omori Sokun left us a lot of the material that we have today for Itiogiri, and he also left behind poems, for example, that his teacher wrote. Teaching advice and learning advice for the shakuhachi. There's a lot of writing that's been translated for you as well. So you get to hear some of the most ancient shakuhachi playing advice as well, which is also kind of to me very very interesting to see. So
Absolutely.
it makes your shakuhachi playing a lot richer as well when you learn about, because you're learning very deeply about like what is monophonic music with this, right? Whereas with shakuhachi it's not as explicit, but the same roots exist there. So it helps you understand what you're doing with shakuhachi. And I remember listening to recording of some Kimpuryu players playing shakuhachi for Sanya Seidan, for example, and when they played it, I could hear this like re, re, roll, kind of just through the entire piece. And like it was really interesting the way that when they played it, that it's almost like they unconsciously understood that there is a nuclear tone and a root tone, and that sort of carries the piece. And when you can take that understanding to a piece, it does change the way that you play them, because you realize like, wow, like this tone feels so good to be here. It just resonates so nicely, and the other ones kind of serve that tone in a way. So
Yeah.
it'll change the way that you play.
Yeah. I also think it helps us develop a sense of what some of the latter scholars meant when they say that that certain notes have centripetal force to them, like they almost have their own gravitational pull. So when we play like those
Yeah.
oohs or those chees, they want to go back to the main body of either the, in our case, a day or a roll, and they want to just gravitate and hang out around there. And for us, as they're playing shakuhachi, why like a lot of the E flats end up being so low or more relatable to classical shakuhachi playing. Why that oo note in the otsu register is so low and wants to hang out about re as well, is because that nuclear ray has so much gravitational pull to it that it actually flattens the note above it, and it's a beautiful effect.
Yeah, agreed. Let me bring it back to the Bohm system since I got that up though. So it looks like what is being spoken of with the Bohm system is the system of levers and things that you see on a modern Western silver flute, right? Where it's got the keypads, right, and the things and the stuff, and the levers and all that kind of thing that open and close holes. So the question would a cylindrical shakuhachi work with a bow and flute system? And I really don't know, because that's kind of beyond anything that I've worked with. But
I think he was trying to clarify the narrowing of the flute, like I think he's talking more about the bore shape rather than the key work, because
right.
I think key work, as soon as you add keys, I don't know, is it a shakuhachi anymore? I don't know.
I think, for example, if you were, all right, so what does the shape accomplish, right? The shape accomplishes what it accomplishes for you is it makes the two octaves in tune with each other, right? On ancient shakuhachi, even on natural bamboo shapes, you have to adjust your breath, right? Right, the lower octave you have to kind of bring up with your breath a little bit. It's not no straining or anything, but that's just the physical reality of the shape of the bamboo. And when you make a jiari shakuhachi, you bring that kind of wedge shape, and then it flares out again at the end a little bit. That shape creates some back pressure, and it raises the pitch of the lower notes so that they're in tune with the higher notes. So my question for the Bohm flute system is, does it take that into consideration, right? For example, if you made a jiari shakuhachi where both octaves are in tune because of the sort of bore shape that is tapered, then if you had levers on the flutes with a 7-hole shakuhachi and just levers to open them and close them, I would assume that it would work just as you would expect it to, right? Both octaves would be in tune and all that kind of stuff. If you did a very straight bore, I think you would come out with a situation where the lower octave the high notes on the lower octave would be a little bit too low. So you would have to do the same thing and adjust it with your breath a little bit and bring that up a little bit, Cuddy. So if you're just playing straightforward and not making any adjustments and just going like this, you would find that the some of the lower octave tones would be out of tune. But you could correct that with your breath if you maintained the air reed system. If you made something like the clarinet mouthpiece on it or a saxophone mouthpiece or like a whistle style mouthpiece, then you would find yourself with just an out of tune flute, I think.
All right. Well, I think that brings us to a close for it. Nick, thank you so much for coming on today and answering all of the questions. So now that anytime in the future somebody asks us about a flute question about making, we can just send them back to this live stream to have them check it out. So really, really appreciate all the time and energy, and look forward to seeing you next week for our next Hitiyogiri course. If you are interested in the Hitiyogiri course, you can check out more of that stuff on SeanHeadMusic.com in the store page. I've also posted the links in the chat multiple times. If you haven't liked this video yet, like this video, share this video, send it all to your friends. And if you're interested in learning more things about shakuhachi, join the membership. There are a bunch of different levels and hundreds of episodes to learn how to play the instrument, and you might even win a flute. So, Linus, would you like to take us out?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to delve into this. Maybe we can use this as a preview of a future live stream. But Stefan, who gave us the question about the 3D printed flute that kind of launched this whole talk, also asked about having vocal audiation while playing, and how can I fix it? And he said that in his question that he had tried to sing intentionally while playing, in the same way that we sort of advise people, like if you've got a weird whistling tone, to try to make it happen on purpose so that you can control it and get it to go away. And so it's a whole, I feel like that's a whole can of worms. That could be a whole live stream
well
on its own, to talk about vocalizing while playing.
Well, he's in luck because I actually have a video that's dedicated to that. So if he goes to Taidu Tips number 15, I just posted into the chat. It talks about inadvertent audiation or vocalization when playing. So we already have that covered for him in one of the videos. But there is a lot that you can do to help alleviate that. So, but at any rate, it was wonderful having you, Nick, here. Linus, thank you for always moderating and helping us out here, posting links and doing all the things you do. Next week we have another guest, so stay tuned for that.
All right. Well, thank you for being here, and